Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I am excited about this flip today. Little backstory on this piece. I saw it sitting in my neighbor's trash and it was end of fall, starting to get cold, and I thought, I don't have time to do another flip. I don't want to store it in my garage. I just drove past it. Come back like a day later, it's still there, and I thought, you know what, I could use this desk. I'm going to grab it. I look at the weather, and it's like, oh, I've got one more week where the weather's above 50 degrees. I think I can get this done. So this is a cram it in at the last minute flip, and I made it. And I love how it turned out, so I hope you enjoy this video. Here, I've just shown you the roughness of this piece. It's pretty beat up, but nothing that can't be fixed. If you watched my last flip, I used soap and water to clean up the piece. I'm using TSP this time because there's some thick junk. I wonder if somebody had this in their kitchen or something. There's some crusty, gooey leftovers on this. So I need to give this a good clean, scrape off what won't scrub off. This needs to be clean. You always want to clean as much as you can before you start scuff sanding or sanding. So once I get this clean and it's dry, we're ready to sand. When using TSP, remember to rinse your piece. You want to do that before you move on. With this slide out, I want to paint it, even though staining it would look nicer. I'm out of time and I just need to do this quick. So I'm pulling all the hardware off so that I can get this ready to paint. If I had time, I would prefer to sand and stain, but I don't want to take the time. I couldn't take the, it's a faux drawer front that just folds down for the slide out part. I couldn't get the screws unscrewed to take this off because they were stripped. I would prefer to take this off. You're going to get a cleaner paint job if you can do that, but I have to leave this on, and such is projects. You do what you got to do. I can tell this top coat is pretty bad because I'm using 220 grit sandpaper to sand this off. Often I'll do something like 160 with a bigger grit because it can knock stuff off easier. Because the smaller grit, 220 is what I sand down to before I stain. So if I'm going to really knock stuff off, I'll go a bigger grit and then go down to the smaller grit. And this, I just need to sand it once. That's how bad this piece was. So this is kind of it's a long process to sand. It takes patience, but it's also very rewarding, and you can see the result of your work right there. So that's kind of fun about sanding. But I stood here and sanded for a good long time. You can see I just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it just slowly eats away the bad finish. And once it's all sanded down, we can look it over and make sure I got these scuffs out. Some of these deep gouges, these scratches, I'm not good enough to know. I'm not skilled enough to know how to really get these fixed. I get them out as best as I can without sanding through the veneer, and I move on, and I know when I go to stain it, I'm probably going to see those. You can't see them once it's sanded, but when you stain, it'll pop back out again, and I just go, well, that's the best I can do. I got a lot of the yucky stains off of this, so it's not too bad. I scuff sanded this whole piece as much as I could with just the orbital sander. I did not go in with hand sanding and get small places. I just did a rough scuff sand, get any gunk left off that I might have missed, smooth out some rough spots, and just get any last bit of weak finish or anything off, and wipe it down. Always wipe it down. Always wipe it down. You always want a clean piece before you paint. I do need to fill in a few dings and nicks for the base of it because I am painting. I can just fill it in with filler. It doesn't have to be fancy. So I just took my wood filler and filled in that big gash in the front. And it must have been from a chair rubbing against the desk. I'm guessing it was a chair on wheels or something. It's only on the right side, not the left. So that's interesting. And then there's just corner pieces that were kind of cracked and messed up. So fixing those up, and then after it's hardened and dried, I'm going to come back and sand it smooth. And this is nice if you don't have a orbital sander or something. You can sand by hand, especially this wood filler. It's super easy to sand off. And again, because this is the next day, I'm wiping it down again. And this time, though, I'm just using a dry cloth. You can buy a tack cloth to wipe something off before you stain. I think that would probably work best, but I'm just using a shop cloth, and I'm folding it and wiping it and folding it and wiping it and trying to get it as clean as I can. Look at the rag and see, okay, there's no more debris coming off. And then I did realize that some corners were catching on my rag, so I did go through and sand the edges a little bit. Just want to make sure that when we're using this, we're not going to get splinters, because that's not good. I got my old sock, and I'm ready to stain. I ended up going with Ipswich Pine for my stain. I wanted something that was not near as orange ready as I already had, because I'm painting the base green. So I wanted kind of a warm brown. I thought I would go with Early American. That's used a lot in flip videos, but I didn't think it would look right. So Ipswich it is, and I'm liking what I'm seeing as I'm putting this on. Once I got the base coat on, I did go back through and just kind of make sure the stain looked even. I know some of it's already dried a little since I'm outside in the sun, but before I was done with my one layer, I just went and tried to make sure everything looked even. I gave this a couple hours to dry and then came back with a dry shop towel to just knock any dust or bugs off. And then with a 220 grit sandpaper, just lightly scuff sanded. I wiped it off again with a dry towel and went back in with a stain. And I just did 2 coats on this one. Same as before, got a nice even coat, let it dry for a couple hours. This needed wipe down again after sitting outside and probably sanding the edges and such. So I gave this another good cleaning. This can be kind of an annoying part in a project because you feel like, oh, I'm always cleaning. But definitely clean right before painting. You want a clean surface. So I'm trying to use up the rest of the Fusion Mineral paint that's green that I have, Carriage House. And I have this little jar of Everett. And I'm mixing them to give me a little darker green because at the point of filming this, I really wanted some moody dark green something. So I'm mixing the Everett, and I really like the color I got. However, I told myself, oh, I don't need this Carriage House green, even though I have 3 other pieces that are currently that color that were not finished. I won't need it. But in another furniture flip video that I will show you, turns out I needed to touch up a spot, and I had no more Carriage House. So that project is still unfinished because I don't have the paint, and I don't know if I want to buy more. So anyway, don't do that. If you have pieces that you're still working on, don't lose all the paint. Anyway, once this was thoroughly mixed, I was ready to paint. And I mean, come on, painting's pretty straightforward. Do little mounts on the brush, nice thin coat so you don't have drips, and get all the nooks and crannies. And then, okay, so this is kind of funny because I was using up the paint I had, and this paint covers very well, but this desk is has a deceptively large quantity of surface area to be painting. So I actually ran out from the second coat. I was like, ah. So I did like the outside pieces are really, the front got a nice coat of paint. The back, I don't think I did a second coat at all. The insides of each of the spindles didn't get a second coat. And it was fine. I looked around and just kind of like touched up any spot that looked weak. So, it's fine. I'm keeping it, so it doesn't have to be perfect, and I don't have to feel bad about it not being perfect because it looks great, and you'll see in the final reveal, this thing is fantastic looking. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I was pressed for time in finishing this piece. Well, once I got it painted, the base painted and stained, it got cold. So I had to store this in my house at night where it could stay warm. I didn't want the wood to get cold. Out in my garage, it would get cold as it got cold at night. So I'd keep it inside, and then I want to bring it outside because I do not want the poly chemicals in my house. I don't like that. I don't want us breathing it in. It cannot be good for us, which is why I wear a mask so that I don't inhale it as much as possible. But I'm the only one home, so I'm awkwardly, without scratching my paint, trying to get this out my door because I don't have any more paint to patch it with because I threw the container away because it was out. So once I got this awkwardly out my door, I was able to get ready for the top coat. Now, I took my sanding paper and I was going to do a light sanding, and it was scratching my table. And I was like, this is not good. So I stopped doing that. And I just wiped it off with a dry rag and got ready for the clear coat. Now, I love using this wipe-on poly. It's really easy and kind of beginner-friendly. So this is what I was using. And it needs to dry. And with it being colder out, it needed to dry for a while. The second coat was the same process. I awkwardly had to get it out of my house. And I did a quick little scuff sand. Now, I do know that when you're doing poly in between coats and you scuff sand, it makes the poly look terrible, especially if it's not this wipe-on, but like the one you brush on that's thicker. You may not see it as much with this wipe-on. But don't freak out, because when you do the next layer of poly, it does fill in those scratches. But anyway, second coat was the same as the first coat, but you do not scuff sand after your final coat of poly. Never do that. Leave it nice and clean and glossy. For this lap drawer, because it holds the keyboard as long as I use it for that, I figure it's going to get a little higher traffic. So I'm going to put a layer of wax on top to give it an extra top coat. Fusion Mineral Paint has a built-in top coat, but it's very flat and kind of chalky finish. I personally don't really like the chalk finish. So I'm putting this wax coat on. To do that, I have this wax brush. You swirl, wax on, wax off, right? You swirl the wax on. I let it sit for 30 minutes. You can kind of see the swirly waxiness. And then I come back with as best as I can have, a lint-free rag, and you just buff it. You kind of buff it to get it to shine a little bit, and it just deepens the color a little bit. And then it looks all nice and smooth. Now it's time to put all the hardware back on. And we're going to be ready to stage this. I did decide not to wax the rest of the desk. I just looked at all those spindles and thought, I'm not waxing and buffing all that. Not doing it. So the top coat that's built in is going to be enough. The rest of it won't get near as much wear and tear as that drawer and the top of the desk. I really appreciate a simple flip, and this was one. And I was able to get it done in the amount of time I had. I was very thankful. I was like, God, thank you so much. I squeezed another in, and this desk is going to be very helpful for us. So it was perfect timing. The Lord takes care of his people that really live for him. He really does. So let's see what this piece looked like, which maybe some of us look just as rough as this piece before the Lord found us. And let's look at what this was transformed into.